one thing I learned in the UK is there's nothing better than a nice cup of tea. I prefer it with biscuits, and then I can dunk it. Yeah. I just really like their tea. When I first went there, it was when you went into a cafe or something, you had actually two pots that were brought to your table, and one pot was, of course, really strong tea, and the other was just very hot water. So you could mix your own strength at your table. We'll see how far I can go without touching my nose today. This is a little talk about Yellowstone. Now, when I first heard the word Yellowstone, I'm not sure when I first heard it. I've been trying to think about it. But in 1959, my mother's father had died, and she was in Ohio visiting. My dad was stationed in Portland, Oregon. So we, in that summer of 59, we decided my mom went to Ohio to visit her mother, and we were going to drive. And on our way, we would stop in Yellowstone. Yellowstone, wow. Thinking about that for months ahead of time. Yellowstone, that's like Disneyland, but better for a kid my age. I was just a kid, a little guy. So we piled in the car, and we took off. My mother was already in Ohio when we drove. And we got to Yellowstone, and I was amazed at what I saw, with people in their cars and the bears and the wildlife, just there. But the fishing, oh my gosh. My dad was an avid fisherman, and we fished all the time, any weekend, in the rain, in the snow, in the summer, in the sun, in the morning, in the afternoon. I don't believe we ever fished at night. I don't believe we ever fished at night. But we went to Yellowstone, and there's actually a photograph, and I looked for it, but I couldn't find it, of me standing next to Old Faithful. And the date is the day of the earthquake in over by West, the Hepkin Lake incident. And we were camped at the Lamar at Pebble Creek, actually at the campground. And we didn't feel anything. Of course, camping was much different, and we might have had sleeping air mattresses, but it's very noisy over at Pebble Creek, so it didn't wake me, and we didn't know about it until actually we came down out of the mountains, and my dad saw a newspaper that said there was an earthquake. So it's just sort of it's my luck. It's a good thing, you're not in the epicenter, but it's sort of that you didn't get to experience anything. So anyway, we drove on. We stopped in Billings because my dad was he was thinking about transferring from Portland to Billings, and he wanted to look the city over, and decided on that trip, I believe, that we were moving to Billings. So we, very shortly after coming back, we moved to Billings. So Yellowstone was sort of a pathway for me to move to Billings. But like I said, my dad was an avid fisherman. And every weekend through the summer months, if we didn't have a baseball game, we were fishing in the Lamar Valley. And there was nobody there. Pebble Creek Campground was a beautiful place, but nobody camped there. And so we could go up there every Friday or Saturday and camp and then fish all day. And my mom, bless her soul, even if you caught a small fish, it was the best in the bunch. She always had an ability to give you some kind of recognition, whereas my brother and my dad, it was the competition on who caught the biggest fish. Later I had gone up. There's a little insect that keeps buzzing my face. If it's not my nose, it's something else. Oh, God. I'm not fit for news. I'm not fit for the 6 o'clock news on these things. But Yellowstone Park is just a magnificent gem shining in this wilderness here. And I use that wilderness as being in the population. I don't believe in the word wilderness. I call outside the house, that's home too. So Yellowstone was this magnificent gem, and we used to go in, my mother in the fall, she would make my dad take her through the park to listen to the elk bugling in the forest, and she just loved that. And my dad was, he was generous enough for her to put away the fishing pole long enough for her to enjoy what she liked about Yellowstone. And she did like the paint pots. Nobody'd go except me. I'd go with her to the paint pots, and these are the bubbling pools of mud, and they are different colors. And my mother just loved the sound that they made. So everybody in the family got to enjoy. Now, fishing styles were different between my brother and my dad and me, and it might be something along the lines of that movie that Brad Pitt was in, with the fly fishing. But, everybody has their own method. But my dad and my brother, the next hole was upstream. And so when we hit a river or a stream or moving water, they were looking for that hole that had the biggest fish that's upstream somewhere. But me, I preferred looking for rocks, and in Yellowstone they have some of the most beautiful specimens. The key to this is don't take them home. You got to remember my first talk about feathers. This is the same with inside the park in Yellowstone, is don't take anything. Gosh, if everybody took something, there would be nothing left there. People would have picked that forest clean, and the animals would have been in backs of pickups. So just listen to the wind and the rivers and enjoy Yellowstone. Yellowstone's a magnificent place. Now, in later years, I had heard stories about people that had been living up in Yellowstone, and those would have been the sheep eaters. But I'm not really qualified to talk about any of that. These are only things that I heard from people who are qualified, and they're still alive. So go ask them the questions about, the prehistoric or the pre-Montana or the pre-current existence of native peoples in Yellowstone. But some of the things that I've seen that people have been used as reference places, I doubt that natives made those things, but who knows? I'm not qualified to talk about that. What I can talk about is, somewhere in the early years of, my exploration into looking into my roots, my heritage, I just fell in love with the buffaloes. And I always would ask my grandpa before he passed away, talk to me about the buffaloes. He talked to me about buffaloes. He told me stories about buffaloes. And I refer to them as buffaloes because the buffaloes, they're a tribe, you see, and they have characteristics of human beings because they gave us our characteristics in the beginning. So when I heard about the people shooting the buffaloes in Yellowstone because of brucellosis, I began to protest for that, against that. And rightly so, the buffaloes were being harvested and they were taken and drugged into the city dumps and they were left there. You know, nothing was being used. And then the state of Montana started a process of culling the buffalo when they came out of the park, executing them. And so my view of the park changed against. I'm just sad about how the rules were made. I can't talk against law enforcement in Yellowstone because I don't have a clue what they're up against. But what I can say is, the buffaloes are sacred, and they gave us everything we need, and they said in the beginning of time they would provide for us, and there would be no starvation as long as we recognized them as sacred. And so thus I do. I recognize the buffaloes as sacred, and I still go and protest against the buffaloes, but I realize now the machinery of law and law enforcement is, it seems to have turned brutal onto the protester, and I don't condone violence in any form. So I try my best to be a pacifist, but sometimes, a mosquito, it'll take me to the edge and it's done for. So what I want to say to people that come to visit Yellowstone is I have lots of wonderful friends up there working. And their experience is that, as a tourist coming to visit, enjoy the park and enjoy what wonderful experiences you'll have there. But understand you are in the wilderness. These are wild animals, and generally they don't like you. So as a tourist, understand they look fluffy and all, but they don't necessarily like you touching them. So the other thing I want to say too is that if you're sitting there and you're working and you're listening to this talk, thank you for taking the time to listen. As for my friends up at Ventura, please be careful and be safe, wear a mask, and I hope we can have some experiences with Native Market coming up in the future. I did, as in Yellowstone history, I did participate in the first Indian market up in Old Faithful. It was an outstanding event and could have provided many contacts if people had, wanted to reach out to the world. So there was a great opportunity. So anyway, there's opportunities to see wildlife in Yellowstone. Remember, they're wild. Keep your distance. And pack it in, pack it out. Don't leave your garbage there, even if it's in the garbage can. Just take it out. There's so many people coming now. It's not like when I was a kid in Lamar. Lamar would have been totally empty, but now there are groups of people, the paparazzi looking for wolves. And in a sense, to me, it has sort of disrupted some of the features in Yellowstone. But time marches on, and as they say, the railroad waits for no man. If I could go back in time and see what the park looked like, I believe it will not have changed a lot, except for the roads and the impact of people. So this is a little talk on Yellowstone. I'll probably do more because I want to do one on the wolves sometime in the future. We were lucky enough to be witness to that. And so, as well as we will go up and do prayers for the buffalo in October. So, remember buffaloes are sacred. Yellowstone Park is a park, but it's a sacred place too. A lot of wonderful things there for you to see and investigate. So have a wonderful day, and time marches on, I guess.